Good evening. Can you hear me okay? All right. I prepared some remarks for tonight, but I think I may just kind of talk. And so we'll see how that goes. I may be regretting it. I hope you won't. I am really very honored and humbled to be here in this space. Certainly nothing that I ever imagined happening. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to share with you a story as well as some reflections on some things that I think that as a society we need to think very seriously about. However, before I begin, I'd like to bring some people into the room in a kind of different sort of way, people who couldn't be here otherwise, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. So just give a listen to the words of the following people.
Because you're in prison does not mean you have to be hard, cold. Sometimes the smallest thing, like a smile, or a word, serve something so high. I refuse to let this place make me afraid of you. I refuse to walk around with my head hung down, and I refuse to let authorities cripple my pride, my dignity, my sense of life. Maybe it can make whatever I will do, that I am persecuted.
Over the past years, I have studied the criminal justice system from the inside out, and I believe it is in many ways a flawed institution. From the promulgation of unjust laws, through flawed police investigations, arrests, interrogations, and deal-making, through unfair judicial procedures and conditions of incarceration, the whole criminal justice paradigm is awry and in need of fundamental reform. The monumental waste of human and financial resources which takes place in our prisons is something we can no longer afford. And we must not fool ourselves into thinking we can reform the system simply by constructing more cells, hiring more guards, training better counselors, or improving food and health services. A much more fundamental rethinking of our criminal justice system is needed, not just for men and women like myself who find themselves caught up in it, but for society as a whole. We must find new ways to respond to crime, ways which right what has been disturbed and mend the awful damage crime causes in our communities. All of our lives depend on it. Tyrone Wirtz. These are all men and women who are who have been convicted of either first or second degree murder in Pennsylvania and are serving life without parole, which is the only life sentence that we have in Pennsylvania. And the reason why I think it's important to bring them into the room is not so much that these particular people have been involved in Inside Out, though one of them has, and I'll be saying more about that in a few minutes. But they represent the kinds of folks, half of the people who are involved in Inside Out classes. They obviously represent the inside half. So I want to tell you a story. It's certainly a story that I can't imagine that I could never have kind of anticipated happening in my life. I'm trying to think of where to start. And maybe where I'll start is I began going into prisons 27 years ago at the invitation of a friend who just said to me, you know, do you want to come in and do some volunteering inside prison? And, you know, I hadn't thought about prisons ever. Maybe, you know, I saw prisons, say, in movies or, you know, somewhere else, but it wasn't something that was on my very limited radar screen. And so I said, sure. And I'll tell you, that very first day, I will never forget, and this is a couple of things that I wrote about it. Now, the place that I visited was Holmesburg Prison, a decrepit maximum security facility in Northeast Philadelphia. It was so unlivable that it was finally condemned and closed in its 100th year. I mean, literally, the ceiling was falling in on people. And I can remember that first day as if it were yesterday. The smells, the sights, the sounds, the overall feeling of the place. It was kind of this sensory cacophony of stale sweat, old sneakers, clanging bars, crumbling cement, deafening announcements over the PA system, and men, hundreds of men, who seemed to be locked in some bizarre dance, a listless fugue, arrested in time. You know, that was the sense that I got that day, that the feeling that it was, that underneath the noise and the motion lay silence and inertia, revealing a depth of isolation that defies imagination. You know, it was that's what I wrote that day, and there was a deep disturbance that happened inside of me. What I saw, the people I saw, certainly the race and ethnicity of the men that I saw, just it stirred something inside of me that has not left. It's only gotten deeper. The questions have gotten deeper and more profound and more complex over all of these years. And the anger in me has also deepened. And I'll say more about the anger in a minute. But just to kind of tell you what happened, so I was doing this volunteering, and I did that for a number of years, and then I got involved with a group called the Pennsylvania Prison Society, a prison reform agency in Philadelphia. Probably the oldest prison reform agency actually in the country. And in that position, I was there for 7 years, I think. I was going into prisons and jails all the time. I mean, really, several times a week. I met thousands and thousands of incarcerated men and women. And what struck me so much was the waste of humanity that I saw. Anyway, at a certain point, I had to leave that position because we lost our funding, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. And then Temple University was interested in hiring somebody to teach a class. So I right away said, sure, I'll teach, not of course knowing what the class was, hoping it was not microbiology, because I really would not have done so well, or chemistry, which I almost flunked. But it was corrections, and that was perfect, because that's what I know. And so, you know, I started to think, as I'm putting the syllabus together, well, okay, it's a corrections course. How did I learn about corrections? I learned by going there. And so I had to take my students there, and I began taking my students to prisons and jails in the Philadelphia area, in New Jersey, and then a little farther out, a little more kind of north and west of Philadelphia. And we were doing a lot of these trips. I mean, we were on the road a lot. I've taken probably 15,000 students in at this point. And happy to say I've gotten every one of them out so far. But you know, I know there's always a first time. Anyway, so we're doing this, a lot of trips. And what happened was in 1995, I took a group to a state prison in Dallas, not Texas, Dallas, Pennsylvania, 3 hours away from Philadelphia. So we're riding there, you know, and I had taken students there before. I didn't think it was going to be anything special. So we went and we toured the facility, as we usually would do. And then we got this opportunity to sit down and talk with, it was maybe 15 students and myself, to talk with a panel of men serving life. And I had never met any of these guys before. And I'll tell you, that day I will just never forget, because the conversation that we had was incredibly complex and profound. We were talking about crime and justice and race and class and politics and economics and psychology, and I mean all of this stuff that was very nuanced. In about 45 minutes, we went deep, fast, and nobody wanted the conversation to end, but we had to end because, of course, you know, we had a 3-hour ride back. So as we were finishing the conversation, this guy from the panel, a man named Paul, walked up to me and said, "Have you ever thought about doing this over a whole semester?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, like a class, like a seminar. You could bring your students here once a week, and you know, we could have these kinds of conversations, and we could, you know, we could read books together, we could write papers and all that." And I was stunned. I thought, wow, no, I have never thought of that idea, and I probably never would have. And I said to him, you know, that's an amazing idea, and I have to be honest, we couldn't do it here. It's just too far. I could never get students to sign up for it, but I promise you that I'll think about it. And of course, you know, an idea like that, I mean, I could not think about it. It haunted me. And so I kept thinking about it, putting ideas on paper. I came up with the name, the Inside Out Prison Exchange Program. You know, it just seemed to, you know, say what it needed to say, and I came up with a syllabus, but no place to hold it. And so I really wanted to do it at a place called Graterford Prison. It's a very, very large maximum security prison, about an hour outside Philadelphia. And I had very good contacts there. Long story short, I couldn't do it there because right when I was about to ask them, there was this raid on Graterford. They raided it for weapons and drugs, and they shut it down to all outside people and programs and everything for a very long time. So that didn't work. So just to move more quickly through the history, I approached the Philadelphia jails. Very big system, again, thousands and thousands of people. And I talked with this one guy there, and I said, it was a social worker, and I said, okay, let me tell you about this idea. And I described it for him, and I said, you know, it's a pilot. I have no idea if this will work. Are you willing to give it a try? And of course, secretly, I'm thinking, well, if it works, I'll take credit. If not, I'll blame that guy, Paul. But it worked. It worked beautifully. It was just amazing. So we started in September of 1997. We had our very first Inside Out class, and it was unbelievably powerful. I mean, yes, it was a criminal justice class. We talked about all sorts of issues having to do with crime and justice and incarceration and lots of, associated topics. What I wasn't prepared for was how powerful the experience was for people, for the students, the inside and outside students involved. And I'm going to say more about that in a minute, but I want to clarify something which I think is very important, because I think a lot of times when people hear about this program, they get confused. So there are a few things that Inside Out is not that I think is important to share. One, we are not going in to study the folks inside. It's not research. That is not what we're there for. We're not there to ask people why they're, locked up, to talk about their cases, to talk about their history. None of that. It's not that. We are studying issues together, collaboratively. We're also not helping people. It's not service. And I want to talk about service a little bit later on, because I know, obviously this is a school of public service, but I want to say some things about that a little bit later on. Actually, what I'll say in a nutshell right at this moment is this. I have nothing against service, of course, but I think that service is a very charged concept and a very complex concept. And I have a lot of history with all of this. In my background, I used to be the director of service learning and all that in our college. Why it's charged and why it's complex is that there can be an implication that there are those who have, there are those who haven't, those who have will help those who haven't. And where I come from now, in my experience, is that we all have. We all have a lot. And we all have a lot that we need to share with one another as equals, as real equals, not faux equals, but real equals. What I'm saying here is, what is key to this program, this Inside Out program, and I would want to suggest that what's key to any really good community-based learning program is the equality in that room of all of the people involved, recognizing the equality and engendering that equality, and engendering the gifts that are there. Thirdly, I want to say this, another thing that Inside Out isn't. It's not activism, it's not advocacy, we have no agenda that we're trying to put forth. It's an educational program for everybody. It's an educational program. And lastly, it's also not an opportunity for people to create relationships that are going to exceed the boundaries of that classroom. There have to be ways that we can keep this entire thing kind of safe. So we have very strict parameters that we put in place from the beginning, and I'll tell you that I am so glad we've done that, because we have not had any serious incidents in 15 years. 15 years, 400 classes. It's amazing. And if that were not in place, I've been doing prison work long enough to know that things can spin out of control very quickly and very easily. So those are the things that Inside Out is not. But let me describe what it is. And I'm also going to help me describe what it is, I want to share in a minute a few words from some students. Because I think that, I can only say so much. I think what students have to say is very, very important. Picture this, 30 people, 15 outside students, 15 inside students, sitting in a big room in a circle. We always use circles, so I'm glad to see these circular tables here. Feels like I'm at home. And in that circle, we have sitting alternately inside, outside people around the circle. It is there that the learning happens. It's not me at the front, like what I'm doing right now, at the front of the room talking at people. I don't believe that education works like that. Obviously in giving a talk you have to do that, but education, the root of the word education means to draw forth. And so I really love that idea, is the idea of drawing forth from the people in the room what's there and what they have to offer to the whole. And so it's done through dialogue. That entire class, the entire semester, is dialogue. In the large group and in smaller subgroups, each session will break into smaller groups to get more deeply into some aspect or another of whatever the issue is that week. And then towards the end of the semester, the group works on a project together that ideally has some relevance in the real world. And I can give you examples of that at another time later on. That's what the feel of this is. It's really different. But the other thing is, that only describes what it looks like and how it operates. What it doesn't tell you is the power of it. And it's so hard to get words for this, but here's what I would explain. Besides the learning about the issues, and this is not a touchy-feely experience, by the way, and it's not that sort of thing. We are talking about issues. We're studying issues together. But in the midst of that, in the midst of looking at these kind of issues, there's all this other learning on many levels that happens. People learn about themselves, about other people, about assumptions that we all carry, about communication, about conflict, about society, about one's relationship to society. It sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. All of this is happening simultaneously. I feel like I'm juggling all the time, because in the 30 people in the room, everybody's at their own place of development. And you see, it's like these sparks happening where people are coming to new realizations about this or that. Just to give you an example of one very simple, but I think very profound realization. It just popped into my head. There was a guy, an inside student. We were talking about labeling, and we actually challenge all of the students, inside and out, through the semester to drop all labels for the semester, just to try to talk without them, because language is powerful. So when you talk about, somebody being a criminal or an inmate or a prisoner or a convict, those things they're charged words. They're layered with lots of meaning. And so this guy, we're talking about this labeling thing, and I can see something's going on in this guy's head, and I just asked him, what are you thinking about? He said, wow, I just realized something. I think of myself as a criminal. In fact, I really refer to myself as a criminal. So I guess it's no surprise I'm sitting here, huh? I thought, yes, that in kind of a nutshell is the power of labeling. That in a sense, he incorporated that label himself. He sees himself that way and then lives that out. That's powerful. And that's one little tiny, story. I could tell you a million stories. We could be here all night, but I'm not gonna do that. But I do. So I'll get back to saying some things about the power of this in a minute, but I don't want to forget to tell you the rest of the history, and I can tell it relatively quickly, I think. I think where we left off was the first class that I offered in Philadelphia. Is that right? Did I go any farther than that? That's as far as I've gotten? No, I'm kidding. So I kept teaching this class every semester, and then in 2000, 2 other instructors from Temple came to me. Each said, they knew what I was doing. They had an idea for a course. Would I help them out to get it started? And I was glad to do that, and so, we got them started. And frankly, I have to be very, very honest, that's all I ever envisioned. I so loved doing this. It was so dynamic, and it just kind of, it took a lot of time and energy, much more than any other class I'd ever taught. So I wasn't picturing anything beyond that. And so I got them started, and if you remember, I wanted to teach this at Graterford, and I wasn't able to. Well, Graterford really did stay shut tight for a while, but I finally went back there in late 2001, early 2002, with a group of students for a tour. So I'm there, and And we had the same sort of thing. We did the tour, and then we had a panel of men serving life. The man on the end, Tyrone Wirtz, was part of that panel. And I've known Tyrone since I started going into prison. We've worked on a lot of projects together. And he said to me, "Lori, when are you going to do that thing you were telling me about before the raid?" And I have to tell you, I didn't even remember I had said a word to anybody. So I said, "Whoa, my God, I mean, we're doing it in Philadelphia." And he said, "Well, we want it here, you know?" So I said, "Okay, what do I do?" So basically he said, you know, put together a proposal, send it to the superintendent, and send me a copy. He was the president of the Lifers Association, and he would work with the people in activities to take care of the stuff we couldn't from the outside. So I did it. And I figured, oh, I'll hear something back in 2 or 3 weeks. Well, 5 days later, I get a letter from Tyrone. He had gotten all the approvals, told me exactly what to do next, blah, blah, blah. Here's the best part of this story. The next day, I got another letter from another guy in Graterford. I'm looking, don't recognize the name, and I open it up, and basically it says, you know, he was talking with Tyrone about this program coming, and he himself was serving life, and he was going to help Tyrone to get it started. And he said, "Oh, by the way, you may remember me. I met you at Dallas. My name is Paul." So here's the guy with the original idea who knew had been transferred to Graterford, and he was going to, at this point, get it started at Graterford, and was, as you can imagine, thrilled out of his mind that this little idea he had thrown out into the world got legs. So we had our first class at Graterford. It was way over the top. It was amazing. Actually, both Paul and Tyrone were in that class. And it was so amazing, so powerful, that when we finished, the class didn't want to end. Now, how many times, I don't know if any of you teach, but how many times do you have a college class that doesn't want to end? Oh, please. So, but they didn't, so we continued meeting. We got permission. And the reason we were meeting was not just because people were going to miss each other, that wasn't it. Because of all the stuff that we had talked about over the semester, it had become crystal clear to people in the class that the general public was misinformed, miseducated about issues of crime and justice, and we wanted to do something about that. So we started meeting. We called ourselves the think tank. I mean, not that we're any policy-making group for sure, but because we think well together. So the think tank started to meet every week in 2002 in the fall. It's now 2012. We are still meeting every week, believe it or not. We just can't end. No, I'm kidding. We're doing a lot of work, and you'll see why. Early on in those meetings, somebody in the group said, "You know what, this is too good an idea to keep just a temple. We need to do more with it. We need to take it more places. We need to make it into a national program." I just remember laughing, thinking, this is a big country. How do you do that? And so somebody said to me, the Soros Foundation has these senior justice fellowships, senior because of my age, I guess. And so I applied, and to my great surprise, I got it. It gave me money to be able to pay people to work with me over a year's time and work with folks on the inside to put all of the elements together that were necessary to develop this into a national program. And so, and this very quickly, we had our very first national training in July of 2004. 22 people, very trusting people, came in from all over the country to Philadelphia. 7-day intensive training, 2 days of which we spent inside Graterford. And what's very important about our program is the centrality of the people on the inside. The guys in Graterford helped to train our instructors, really helped to train our instructors. And that's really quite a concept when you think about it. They're the people who know. They're the experts in Inside Out. So we started that in 2004, and to fast forward to today, what is this? We're still in September, right? In August, we had our 26th training. We have 374 instructors throughout the United States and Canada. We have a couple of people in a couple of different countries, but nothing moving yet there. But this has taken off. And what's wonderful is that it's consistent across the board. You go to an inside-out class. I mean, I go to closing ceremonies of inside-out classes, and one inside-out class looks like any other one in this way. It's the same methodology, and the same sorts of things happen. This transformative, powerful experience keeps happening over and over and over. And here's why I think, one of the reasons why I think it's the case. I'm going to kind of explain it in a different sort of way. At the end of the semester, there's a lot of sadness when we end, because people know that they won't see each other again. Well, sorry, not because. Let me reword this. There's a lot of sadness at the end of the semester, and people are not going to see each other again. I think that's one of the reasons why there's sadness. Here's what I think is the other reason, and a deeper reason. That in that space, and this is, I don't want you to miss this because this is really central to this whole thing. There's something that gets created in that space that happens through dialogue where people are invited to be their best selves. And this is happening inside a prison, inside sometimes a maximum security prison. People are invited to be their best selves, to say what they really think. There's a ton of respect and dignity afforded to everybody. And so we talk, we share in some really deep and powerful ways about things that are important to every one of us as human beings and as citizens. And I think that the reason why there's such a mourning at the end of that, it's people are sad, deeply sad, because the space that has been created is going away. That space that, frankly, I think as human beings we hunger for. I mean, think in your own life. I think in my own life, where do we do that? You know, where do we have spaces where we can feel really, really free? And free with a bunch of other people to talk about things that are of great import. I mean, it doesn't happen very often. And I think that's what people are most deeply sad about. And it's one of the things that we celebrate in this program, that we can do this. So what I say at the end of each semester is, please don't keep this as just a really nice memory. You've got to take this and create spaces like this in the world. See, here's the deal. We have a tagline that's part of our program that essentially says, moving beyond the walls that separate us. And I think that's what's happening. I mean, we are certainly moving beyond the prison walls, but when you think about it, here's something I want to suggest to think about in terms of walls for us to consider. If I interact with another person and that person is different, and I'm threatened by the difference in that person, the easiest thing for me to do is to put up a wall to protect myself. We do that all the time. We do it without knowing it. We do it as individuals, we do it as groups, we do it as nations. We do it. There are a lot of walls between us and around us. And I think that, and we've probably all had this experience, that it's through dialogue that those walls start to break down, that we can start to move through the walls, because through dialogue we start to engage beyond the difference. We go to something deeper. And we're all capable of doing that. I just realized that I wanted to share some words of students with you, so I'm going to share a couple. I also want to be aware of time. This will give you a little bit of a sense. So these are the words of some students. This is an outside student. What a motley crew we made in that little program room at the prison. I often think about the incredible dynamic of our group and wonder what we must look like to people outside that room. People of different colors, sexes, ages, education levels, social classes, and opinions, all in a circle, laughing, talking, arguing, respecting each other for hours at a time. It has to make it difficult for anybody who watches to hold on to the status quo. The status quo says that doesn't happen. I mean, this is precisely what I was just talking about. It says that people are different and that some things are never going to change. And for 2.5 hours every week this semester, we proved that untrue. An inside student said, the group miraculously transformed me to another place and time where I no longer felt like an outcast, a place where I felt my opinions were respected. That's a tough, prison is a tough place. I mean, we know that. And I mean, people would say, well, yeah, we send people to prison just for that reason. We want it to be a tough place. But what he's saying, there's something about respect and how important respect is. And and my guess is, I don't know who this was, but probably he spent a lot of his life not feeling very respected. Boy, there are a number of directions that I want to go here. Let me just say this. I want to go back to, I said that I would come back to this, and I think it's important to, especially in this context here. When I talked about the rage that I had, and that I have inside of me, see, when I first started going in, I was trying to figure out what this was all about. And when you look at how much we incarcerate, like, what does that say about our social psyche? And I think that I've come to understand some things over the years that, and I'm going to actually rely on my notes for this because I want to get it right, that the anger, the mistrust, and the fear that live deep within our society are expressed powerfully and pathetically in our willingness to put one another behind bars and walls, our willingness to lock each other in what are essentially cages, as we feed the fantasy that this is actually accomplishing something positive in the world. It's a fantasy as dangerous as it is unconscious. I mean, we're actually compounding the brutalizing effect on society as a whole. I'm sure you've heard Dostoevsky's quote that's used a lot. The degree of civilization in a society can be measured by entering its prisons. And to me, it seems that he is saying much less about those who are in the cages than about the caging itself. I mean, when I think that I am part of a society that so easily and quickly puts people literally in cages, I don't know how many of you have ever been in a prison, but many of those places look like cages. That is not a place for human beings. Now, does that mean we don't do anything? No. I believe very deeply that we need to be held accountable for our actions. Every one of us does. My question is whether this is an appropriate way to hold people accountable. And we need to hold society accountable in a number of ways. We are pretty much the most powerful country in the world, a lot of resources and all that. So how ironic it is that we also are the biggest jailer in the world by a lot. That seems to be a bit of a mismatch. So kind of, you got to wonder what's going on there. I've lost my train of thought here. Give me 1 second. I'm so sorry. Well, okay. I think actually I have to move towards wrapping up anyway, so this is how I would like to wrap up. And then we'll do see if you have any questions, comments, or whatever. This is kind of a way of summarizing. Let me put it that way. So Inside Out is a college class, obviously not an ordinary one. In these classes, the roles are intermingled. Everybody's a teacher, everybody's a learner. The process of investigation and discovery is both communal and collaborative. We explore together, we grapple together. We actually create new knowledge together, which is so exciting. And of course, we challenge each other to go deeper. And at the same time, in a very unlikely setting, Inside Out provides a space of liberation, a place where each person is afforded the dignity that we all deserve. And in the face of the many forms of imprisonment that we all bear in our lives, some internal, some external, this experience offers to everyone an intimation of freedom. And in our wider social reality, as I was talking about before, Inside Out is about walls. Walls of our own making, as well as the walls constructed by others. Some of these walls are made of bricks, but all of them are held in place by the mortar of fear and ignorance. We fear what we don't know in others, in the world, even sometimes in ourselves. So we build walls thinking that we can keep ourselves safe from whatever we imagine is threatening us. And that's a dangerous delusion. One of the things that Tyrone said some years ago, he was in a meeting with us in the prison, and he kind of looked out the window and you could see the wall there, and he said, you know, that wall isn't there just to keep me in, but to keep you out. And so part of what we do in Inside Out is we take people in. It's our duty to do that. And I want to tell you another thing about Tyrone, which is really a wonderful thing to be able to say. He had a life sentence. After 36 and a half years, his life sentence was commuted, so he got out. And he's been working with us for the past year and a half as our public relations person. Yes, yes. It's a wonderful story. I would love for Paul to be able to get out. I mean, wouldn't that be amazing as well? So I want to finish with just one other little piece here, and then let's see what we have to say. Inside Out moves beyond the walls that separate us. In a more literal sense, it moves actually through the walls. It's an exchange, it's an engagement between and among people who live on both sides of the prison wall, and it's through this exchange, realized in what I think of as the crucible of dialogue, that the walls that separate us from each other and that separate us sometimes from ourselves begin to crumble. And we are then brought closer to our truest, most essential selves. You know, Robert Frost once said, I love this line, something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. And so my hope is that in time, through this exchange, that these walls, the walls between us, around us, within us, that the walls will become increasingly permeable and eventually extinct. One idea, one person, one brick at a time. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, we do have some time for questions. Let's wait till the microphone gets to you. So this table is loaded up here. So where's the mic for this? Jeannie, right here. Yeah, look, yeah.
Hi, I'm Kayla Brooks. I'm a student here at the Clinton School, and
Hi.
I really admire your program. It reminds me of a prison life class that was offered at my undergrad at Vanderbilt. But my question is, you talked a lot about going into prisons where men were located, and I wanted to know, with the influx of like young people with the high school to prison pipeline thing going on, do you all ever go in and have these dialogues and conversations, I guess, with the juveniles, or even with the growing number of women that are being locked up? Do you ever go in and have these conversations in those facilities as well?
Well, absolutely with women, yes. With young people, it's a little bit different. It would be hard. Well, we have a couple of instructors who teach in juvenile facilities, but you have to understand that some juvenile facilities, that juvenile is defined as up to 25. Where I would find it difficult is if you have college students and say, young people who are 13, 14, 15, the equality of voice would be very difficult. And that, what I don't want our program to slide into is becoming a mentoring program. I mean, mentoring programs are great, that's just not what we do. And so I don't want us to go there. However, there have been some alumni activities where alumni, outside alumni of our program, this especially has happened in Oregon, have set up an inside-out-like reading group in a juvenile facility. And so it's the alumni with these young people talking about various books and all. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Let's see. All right, let's go right here. And then we'll...
Misty Borkowski, part of my law practice is representing criminals in defense. And I'm curious as to how the inmates that participate in the programs are selected.
Okay. That depends on the institution and what they work out with the given school, but it could look like, so I'll give you the two examples from my experience. In the Philadelphia jails, I did the class through a particular drug treatment program. And so there were people in that treatment program, the social workers, talked about this opportunity, asked if people wanted to sign up, they would sign up. I would interview the people, and then we'd go from there. In Graterford, a much larger place, they literally put sign-up sheets at the end of each very, very, very long block. And then the institution takes the names and does the screening necessary, and then sends me the names of, say, 30 or 40 people, and I interview them, and then choose from there. Some people will have folks write an essay or answer questions. I mean, there's lots and lots of ways that can be done. People are not going to be able to hear you.
I'm Dana Garrison. I'm an instructor with the Rhetoric and Writing Department at UALR. It seems like all of the inmates you've talked about tonight, or at least the ones that are over there on the screen, are lifers. Are the participants always lifers? And if so,
No.
Okay.
We have classes in county jails. So in those situations, pretty much statistically across the country, 2 out of 3 people in county facilities are pre-trial. So they haven't even gone to trial yet, or they're doing short time. But even at Graterford, which has a lot of people serving life, in any given class, I may have maybe a third of the participants, of the inside participants, are serving life, and then anything else down to 2 years. But I just happen to that. These folks, by the way, these pictures are from a book called Doing Life, which I highly, highly recommend. So I'm glad that you asked in terms of clarification.
Hi, I'm very fascinated with what you're doing. I think it's
Thank you.
wonderful. I just wanted to ask you first, if you could tell me what you were doing when you first volunteered in the prison. And second of all, I'd like to know, these students that are coming in, are they sociology majors, or are they, and then you even said that you have other instructors who bring other classes in. So are there a variety of,
Yes.
could you just explain that to us?
Let me answer the second first and see if I can remember your first question. My memory has kind of slipped over the years. I failed to say this, that when we started the national replication, we were really focused on instructors in criminal justice and maybe a little sociology. What happened organically over the years is that people would talk with colleagues at their universities and colleges in other departments and say, you would love doing this. So I can say now at this point, 10 years into the, 9 or 10 years into the replication, that we have people teaching literally across the social sciences and across the arts and humanities throughout the country. I mean, everything from, classes in economics to yoga to the humanities. We have law classes in law schools that are happening. I mean, it's really quite diverse. And that's not something we could have planned for. I mean, part of what I love about how this program has gone is that it has grown organically. And what I mean by that is that it's influenced by who gets involved. To your first question, I began as a tutor, and I found out that I really am a terrible tutor. Who knew? But I continued going in, kind of maybe in a supportive counseling sort of thing, and then through some religious activities, and then on to the Pennsylvania Prison Society. The outside students?
These students, are they sociology majors?
No.
Or?
They're all sorts of majors.
All sorts of.
Yep, all sorts of majors.
Jennifer got a question right here. Bill's bringing you the...
Hi.
Hi.
In the 90s, the Pell Grants were taken out of the prisons and have pretty much decimated the landscape of higher education in prisons nationwide. Can you speak to what the future might hold for higher education in prisons right now?
That's a big question. As we all know, well, maybe we don't know, there were hundreds of college programs in prisons before the Pell Grants went away. And at that time, and up until, I'd say, pretty recently, there ended up being in the country maybe a dozen programs that still existed. One of the things, and I'm going to directly answer your question in a second, but I just want to say this one thing about Inside Out, which is kind of unique. We kind of get college classes in through the back door. It's a very interesting way of getting them in, because we're not bringing in programs, we're bringing in just a class at a time, and then over time, schools will build programs. I have seen more and more over the past couple of years of coalitions of schools, colleges and universities in particular areas banding together and starting whole programs, degree granting programs, and figuring out creative ways of coming up with funding for those programs. So, who knows, and I think there's also a push to reinstating Pell Grants for sure. There's a bunch of people working on that. But there's a lot of things happening simultaneously, I guess is what I'm saying. But the other thing that's happening is, these folks coming together from different schools to partner and to look at what the possibilities are of building something together, which, when you think about it, is a very strong thing to do. I mean, always when you partner with people, there's strength in that. So, does that help? Is that a good enough answer for you? Okay.
Yes, I was just curious, when you go to initiate Inside Out at a new facility, if you could speak to maybe how receptive most institutions have been, or what kind of barriers are in place, to starting that program.
Yes. Places have been shockingly receptive, because it's when you think about it from the point of view of the administration of a prison, it would be an irritation, because security is the #1 concern. So what, you're going to troop in 15 undergraduates? Why would you do that? Amazingly, we have relatively little problem getting in, and here's why. First of all, we have a record. We have many years now that we can, and our instructors, part of what happens in the training is the instructors learn about that and can cite a lot of our record. But secondly, we make it, and our instructors make it really clear that we have very strict parameters around this program. And the whole thing about no contact, what we're not, all those, what Inside Out is not, I have seen correctional officials exhale when I say those things. And I had somebody say to me, Yeah, you really get it, don't you? See, it's all about knowing that this is their turf and that I need to respect that and need to realize what that means and play according to the rules, you know, without deviating from what I think is important to do. But it's an educational program in that setting. And so, anyway, I'm saying much more than I need to. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Let's give Lori a round of applause.
Thank you.
And there were some hands still up, so y'all please come up and visit with her before you leave. Thank you all for coming, and we look forward to having you next time. Thanks.